Good morning, everyone. Greg here from Master Trader. I want to ask, do you know of a service that constantly posts or says, hey, I have a sell signal or uh, about a particular stock moving, but it always happens after the fact? I mean, this is something that I saw coming through my inbox yesterday. You get inundated with uh, emails from different places, even when you don't subscribe to them. But it's just the nature of email and marketing and such. But um, all of a sudden, I called a sell signal. Well, or they called it yesterday. And I was saying, to my subscribers and Dan's subscribers, we posted that we have a sell signal here on 724 here. It obviously wasn't happening at the moment. It was not clear, but our market internals and the analysis that we were doing at the time was saying that, the market's gone up and up. And, say, well, you know what? It's going to happen sooner or later. Well, of course, it always does. But look at this weekly chart. I mean, there hasn't been a sell signal. Well, the last buy signal we had was right here on the election, and that was from our market internals before the election results. And now we get a sell signal. It wasn't a really strong one. I'm going to actually show you the letter. But we got a sell signal here on 724, and there was a lot of chop sideways. And of course, it was like, you know what, you have doubts about it, and of course I did. But there was no reason to go long here. And then once the long, I guess right here on this day, it looked like, okay, that would be a reason to go long. And then, the breakout failed. That's typically what happens when you have a sell signal in force. And, one of the big reasons, and I mentioned in yesterday's letter, was the fact that sentiment had reached such a bearish extreme. Meaning, so many traders that are using leveraged options are betting that the market's going to continue to and rip higher. And you say, well, why would anybody think that after like 1, 2, 3 weeks going up? Honestly, it's just human nature, I guess. And, when it comes to the markets and greed and fear and those things that we all know have an effect on the actions of traders, especially novice ones and even institutions that feel like, they're going to miss the boat. And, I've been studying and using these internals for decades, and I mean, they're deadly accurate. So, they saved our subscribers from getting involved in questionable situations, and even some situations that don't look too questionable. But when you have these sell signals in force, breakout failures are more likely to happen. So, before I'm going to actually show you the letter, because you might say, well, Greg, you're telling me that, but show it to me in writing. And I'm going to do that. I'm going to show it to you what actually went out to subscribers. And this is a typical Monday morning letter that starts out with a plan for the week. And, I give an overview about what's happened during the week, what's coming up during the week. Some news events. I go over different chart patterns. A lot of education as well, and it shows here some of the patterns and possibilities as what's going to happen, and they show different price structures and how to play them. And we go through the broader markets and where they're at, what's showing relative strength, relative weakness, where's the major and minor support. And I do a video on that and explain the setups and the concepts that we look at. And then we go through a trend matrix, and I show what the trends are in the broader markets and different sectors, S&P sectors. What are the trends up or down or sideways in the weekly time frame, the daily time frame, the hourly time frame. And then we look for markets in our sectors that are aligned on the weekly and the daily time frame. And then, of course, then we either can play the sector or play the stocks within the sectors. In other words, a top-down approach. And I do a video on that and look at the particular sectors and talk about those and probably some stocks of interest as well. And here, is our market internals, and I don't have a chart of them, but I just show exactly, where they're at. And at that time, it was the first time in many months that we had a sell signal, and it wasn't a strong one. That's why I said we have a tentative or weak signal, sell signal from our market internals, where we need to have breadth and sentiment aligned on either side, either bearish or bullish. And monetary has been bullish for many, many years. And that's another conversation. And we go over some earnings that are being reported. So on that week, we had a lot of the big dogs, as they called it, reporting. And then we have our recommendations, at the time of that week. And as this is a typical Monday letter. And all of this is tracked in the members area, all the plays, open plays, and are updated. So if you're interested in, looking at the letter, you can go to this Master Trader site, just take a trial for $7, and you could look through the old issues and see, what I'm actually saying and the plays that we're actually putting out, and Dan's videos on options trading. There's a lot of great educational stuff in there that you might want to take a look at. All right, so markets are down this morning. S&Ps are down 1175 as I speak, but still holding support for the moment. Odds are it's going to go down. They had an opportunity to break higher, and they couldn't do that yesterday. Well, they got a little higher, but they just hit resistance. And, you might hear me say this a lot. You probably do. Because I just try to point everyone in the right direction as far as getting away from the hocus pocus, holy grail, mythology of indicators and Fibonacci's and Elliott waves and this and that. Just look to the left. Where's the resistance? And you see futures hit the minor resistance area and back down they went. Okay. Now, you say, well, what happens when they don't get there, Greg? Well, we have rules for that and patterns for when they don't get there, and that's what I call creating resistance within a void. So this is a void. You'd hear me talk about voids, but there are patterns that set up that create resistance. Okay? This one just happened to hit that minor resistance area, and now it's coming down to the support area intraday, which is the bottom of this base, and you can be sure that every intraday trader and institutions are watching this with wide open eyes to see, is this level going to break? And this weekly chart, we're getting a topping tail this week. It certainly looks like that's going to happen, and we'll see how far down this comes. This 50 MA is going to come into play. It always does. There's nothing to the left there, but as far as support, but it's a moving average that's widely followed, and you'd probably want to look at that on the actual spiders. So this morning we're getting a gap down. It's at 246.32. So right down, gapping down to the low of this green bar here, but just above the support. And here's where the 50 is on the spiders. Let's look at the NASDAQ futures. Here's where I showed you the measured distances of the prior rallies and said, hey, you know what, this is probably going to be an area where prices are going to stall just because, the size of the move. And then the internals, of course, and now we've gotten this chop, and this hasn't broken through support yet, so we shall see. It looks like it's on its way there. The Dow, which has been outperforming and rallying up, we had this move up where the rest of the market wasn't doing anything, and it's always a warning sign. And while that was happening, we had the transports starting to deteriorate, and we had the Russell with breakout failure deteriorating. So there are always these intermarket relationships and market internals, or what I like to call techno-fundamental analysis. It's a three-legged stool of the method that we use to determine where the markets are at, where money is flowing into and out of, and how to utilize that information for ourselves and subscribers to make money. That's what we're all doing here, right? We're all here to make money, but we need a method and guidelines and trading rules and all of that, and that's what we do every day. Interesting, Starbucks, falling apart here. Interesting because it's just been so strong. I mean, it started to had this cup and handle, and here's a perfect example of why, you have to have stops in place and be open-minded and objective, and rules that, can change your mind, because this was looking so great on the weekly chart, uptrend, rounding bottom, new highs, and then collapse. So without rules, you become a victim of something like this. Okay, video's getting a little long here. Let's take a look at oil. Looking good, right, which is going to weigh on the transports, but coming up into resistance. This is actually a setup that could form a double top and roll back over, so be careful of that. It looks like it can go higher, and I'm not saying it can't. Obviously, got to clear this high, but this resistance point here is going to have an effect. And money running toward bonds here, out of equities a little bit, but it's sloppy. And here it looked like it was going to go higher, looked great. So patterns like this, regardless of what's happening on the daily time frame, it doesn't have to be perfect on the daily, but you want to get the direction right, and then align that with what's happening on your intraday patterns or a setup. All right, everyone. I got a few things moving here. Interesting retail. Macy's starting to fall apart again, and this turnaround yesterday, and I guess the earnings are out, and this is collapsing again. That new IPO, and well, let's see what else is moving here. But it's, as again, take a trial to our service for $7. I'll tell you, you cannot beat it. The education, you'll learn about a lot of different trade setups and utilizing of options, and just the fact that you can read our prior letters, the education there is, it's a steal. just to get that education, even if you don't like the service after a while, but I'm sure you will. So try it out and give me a shout out, Greg at mastertrader.com. Have a great trading day.